Okay, I'm going to try to do this a little bit faster. I already recorded this video once and went slightly over my 15-minute limit on YouTube. Basically, I want to go over what metapackages are and a little bit about Debian and basically choosing a distro. I quite often get asked, what distros do I like? And I tell people my favorite distro is Debian. It is a solid distro. It is a great distro for customization and building a system up from a base system. But I also use Linux Mint quite often, one for an out-of-box solution, and also a lot of my viewers use Ubuntu or Mint, since those are two of the most popular distributions, and I want to be using something similar to what they have. That being said, I also like Slittaz for an out-of-box solution for a older system, but really it's not nearly as stable as Debian, and if you take the time with Debian, you can get a system running just as smooth. But basically, Linux Mint, Ubuntu, out of the box, they try to be everything for everyone. They try to have all the drivers you need and all the applications they think you might need. And that's great for the average user, but really what it causes is bloat. And I'm not bashing them. As I said, I use Linux Mint. But when a system tries to be everything to everyone, you get bloat and your system's not going to run as smooth. Systems nowadays are fast, so you're not going to have that problem with an average user. But if you really want a clean running system, you're going to have to do some things yourself. And that's where something like Debian comes in. Debian is a great system to build on and create a well-running system. That's why so many distributions are based on it. Ubuntu, Mint, Migo, Memo. And it doesn't require you to be doing a lot of compiling because you have this repositories that are pretty much just as full as Ubuntu or Mint. There might be one or two applications that are in one and not the other, but for the most part, they're just as full. But recently I was watching a video by a YouTube user whose name is Got Bless You, and the guy does some pretty good videos. I do watch his videos quite often because he just basically reviews software, and I get to see software that I may not have known existed, and I get to go and try it. But he recently did a video called First Impressions Debian Sucks LOL. First off, I guess he's somewhat joking because he wrote LOL at the end here, but if you read his comments and see what he says in the video, the issues he was having was basically due to what are called metapackages. He claims he understands metapackages, but he still used them, which is the problem. He was saying that he used the default install Debian with GNOME. Now, every time I've ever installed GNOME, you don't get a desktop environment. As you can see right here, you get a command line environment, and you have to install the base system, the base window manager that you want, and desktop environment. But he had problems where he was trying to remove small applications and it wanted to uninstall GNOME, and he was saying that the Debian developers are idiots. They're not. That the problem was the user side. He installed a meta package, even though he claims that it was installed by default. Maybe he was using something other than an official distro. Anyway, I need to get going so I don't run out of time here. But basically, if you do a quick search on Google, and all I did was Google Debian GNOME, this is the first page that came up. It is the Debian wiki on GNOME, and it tells you your options on installing GNOME. You have GNOME desktop task, you got GNOME package, you got the GNOME desktop environment, which I think is the one he probably installed. You got GNOME accessibility and GNOME core, and over here it tells you what each one is. And really, the average user, the regular Debian user, the reason they're using Debian is because they want to start with a base system and build up and only put the stuff that they want in there so they have a clean running system. So really, most Debian users would use this GNOME core, which is a minimalistic GNOME install. So when you install that, it doesn't even install Xorg, so you also have to install that, and it doesn't install a GUI login like GMD, which if you want that, you have to also install. So if you just install this and Xorg, you'll still come to a command prompt like this to log in, and then you have to start X. But quickly, we'll just go, I'll log in here. Oh, gotta click into my virtual box here. And we would do, well, first you would do an aptitude update to make sure you have the newest packages in your repositories, and then an aptitude upgrade just to make sure everything is up to date on your system. Then after that, you would do an install gnome-core, and you would hit enter, and obviously it would go through the install. It's going to install like 300 something packages. I think it's going to be like, yeah, 539 megabytes after installing. And this is the minimalistic version of GNOME. Now, once again, this doesn't even install Xorg. I could have added that to command, or after I do this install, I can add it. I can install it then. But I'm going to do that. It's going to take a little while, and then we'll come back and we'll see what it looks like. Okay, so I installed GNOME Core, and I also installed Xorg. I did not install a graphical login screen, so I'm still going to be defaulting to the command line, but then I'll just log in and start X. Real quick, I want to talk about what Metapackages are. Metapackages are there to make things easier for the average user. A metapackage is basically an empty package. They're also called dummy packages that link to a bunch of other packages. Basically, they have a bunch of other packages as dependencies. So the GNOME desktop environment package, which is a meta package, is going to link to the GNOME core package and a bunch of other applications that they think that the average user would want. The problem with this is if you try to remove one of those applications later on, it's going to try to uninstall the GNOME desktop environment package because it sees that as a dependency. And that is one of the big problems with meta packages and why they should be avoided. But they put them in there so that someone who doesn't want to put the effort into building a system can quickly do things as one click. But as I said earlier, every time I've installed Debian, and I've done it a number of times on a number of different systems, I've never seen one that has GNOME as a default install. Every time I've installed, you start at the command line here, and that's because that's what Debian is for. It's for building a system up. So I logged in here as a regular user. I'm going to start X, and as you see, when this starts up, it will be a very minimalistic GNOME install, very few applications installed. I also want to talk about, and I'm not sure if I said this earlier, and well, before I start talking, let's just look. Very minimalistic, not very much stuff in here. I'm going to go and I'm going to use Synaptic to install the CD burning application that he had installed. And I'm using Synaptic when I normally would use Aptitude just because that's what he used in his video. So I'm going to search here for CD burn. There we go, right there. Barcerio, I guess is how you say that. Mark it, install, mark its dependencies, and click apply. Apply. Okay, so as far as there being bad distributions of Linux, people argue, oh, this version of Linux is better than this distro of Linux and this distro. And in my opinion, as long as it's open source, there really isn't good and bad because it's what you make of it. But there are different distributions that are supposed to be more geared towards certain tasks. The average user, Linux Mint and Ubuntu are great. Like I said, I use Mint a lot. I'm not bashing them. But they try to be everything to everyone. They try to be an AvBox solution. The problem with this is you get bloat. You get a lot of applications and background processes and files that you don't need just to make sure you have everything that you do need. And that's where something like Debian comes in. Debian starts as a base system, and then you add on to it to get the system that you want. And that's why you can make a streamlined Debian. But if you use Metapackages, you're kind of going back to the other way, so you might as well use Linux Mint and Ubuntu. Because once you have Debian set up, it's no more difficult to use than Ubuntu or Linux Mint because it basically is the same thing. But the initial setup can be a little more difficult. As you've seen, we've already had to do command line stuff, which scares some people. But also, it doesn't automatically detect all your hardware for you and install the drivers. A lot of this has to do because there's non-free stuff, and Debian tries to not use non-free stuff, although there are non-free repositories for it. But the initial setup is a little more difficult. But let's say I set up a Debian machine for somebody. Once it's all set up and GNOME's installed and everything's set up how you like it, after that, it's going to be just as easy to use. You have your package manager, you have repositories, which are just as full. There are some applications that are in Ubuntu and Linux Mint that aren't in Debian, and same the other way around. Ubuntu doesn't have Cinerella video editor in its repositories. Debian does. Um, so once the CD burning application is done installing, what we'll do is we'll remove it, and that will show that the it won't remove GNOME because we didn't use the meta package. And once again, I'm not bashing that got Bluetooth, whatever his name was. I watch his videos regularly. He shows a lot of applications that he basically reviews applications a lot, and it helps me see applications I may not know exist, and that's why I watch his videos. But you can't call Debian developers idiots, which he does, because of a mistake he made. So there we have this application installed. Let me go to status here. We'll go installed, and we'll find it again. And you'll notice I'll do a complete removal. It doesn't even remove the dependencies. Now, if you tried removing one of the dependencies for this package, it would remove this package because this package relies on that, but it doesn't go the other way around. So it's not trying to uninstall GNOME. It's just removing that one application. So basically what I'm trying to say is average user that just wants to do web browsing and basic stuff, use Linux Mint, use Ubuntu, don't use Debian or other distros that require you to do a little more work. If you want to be a more advanced user, a medium level user to advanced, Debian is great. It doesn't require you to do compiling and stuff, which is another step you can get. You can go get into something like Gentoo or Arch, which I have not really used either of those, but that takes it a step further where you're compiling for your system. But if you want a clean running machine that you don't have to put forth that effort, but you do have to put forth effort. If you want a good running machine, you're going to have to do a little work. I'm not saying that Ubuntu and Linux Mint don't run good, because nowadays machines are so fast, it really doesn't matter, because they're designed for like Windows 7 and Windows Vista, which are mega time bloat. But if you have an older system, or if you just want your system running really well, and you're willing to put a little work, and you're going to learn some stuff, give Debian a try. But if you're not going to put forth that effort and do some reading, as I showed you earlier, the Debian wiki told us exactly what GNOME packages are available and what each one was and how to install them. If you're not going to do the reading, don't bother. Also, the YouTube user that did that video was saying that he was using SID. Now, there's always 3 versions of Debian going: stable, testing, and unstable. SID is unstable. Why he was using unstable as a beginner, I don't know. I don't even use SID when I use Debian, because you're going to have problems because it's unstable. It's going to crash, especially if you're using Metapackages. You're not going to last very long. Currently, Lenny is the stable, and problem with Lenny is that you are going to have some older packages because everything has to go through the other 2 versions, the unstable and the testing, before it gets to Lenny. And that's one of the reasons that Debian is so stable, is because it has those 3 sections it goes through before it gets to stable, but you do get older. So it's kind of a balanced thing. Do you want to have a really stable system but older software, or do you want the brand new software but you're going to have problems, you're going to have to put extra work? Once again, it's more for medium to advanced users. I'm not telling people to switch unless they want to. You're going to have to do some work. But really, I'm not bashing any distro, which that guy does. He bashes Debian, he bashes Fedora. I've never really used Fedora, but it's fairly popular, so it can't be that bad. And not only but other viewers, if you read the comments on that video that he made, a lot of people try to help him and tell him what his problem is, and he insists that he knows what Metapackages are, and that's not what he did, that he did the default install, and that Debian developers are idiots. Man, we're trying to help you, we're trying to guide you, and he ended up he was relatively nice, but I saw some other people who commented where he ended up just cursing at them and calling them names when they were just trying to help him, and he wasn't listening. So remember that you're going to have to do some work to get a good running system.